Thank you very much, Michelle, for hosting the talk, and thank you very much, Kate, for joining us and for allowing us to record your talk tonight. Really looking forward to hearing from you as a precursor to our lovely free workshop that we're going to have in August, on the 1st of August, which is going to be part of the Cork Textiles Network association with Cork Craft and Design. For the Craft Month, we're offering a free workshop, which is your workshop, which is fantastic. It's a 2-hour workshop, and anyone in the country can join in. You don't have to be a member. But as part of that, we're also offering a membership of CTN for the rest of the year, where you could join for 2023 for €10. So it's a very generous offer, really, and I'm really looking forward to your workshop. So thank you for tonight. I'm going to hand over to you now, and thanks for being with us.
Thank you. Well, it's an absolute pleasure to be here, and thank you so much for inviting me to come in and chat about what I do and share it with you. It was a really wonderful opportunity to actually sit down and kind of focus my thoughts on what I've achieved and the progress, because I guess, you know, when we're so busy in life, you're kind of always looking forward, that sometimes it's nice to sit and collate and reflect upon what you've done and how you've done it, and what the inspiration was, because sometimes having that little bit of time and space between projects helps clarify what you were interested in, or kind of make some of the connections that you can't quite piece together when you're in the moment. So I'm delighted to be here, and we were talking earlier about how synchronicities and a series of happy events kind of connected myself and Carmel, and that's kind of been my life, which it's quite fun to think about in that way. So what I'm going to do is I've prepared a slideshow which has images of what I've created over the years, and I've kind of put it in chronological order. I thought that made the most sense. Please feel free to ask any questions if anything comes up that I'm not clear or we would like a little bit more information about. I'm going to try and keep this concise. It's very easy to go down rabbit holes, so I'll also be keeping an eye on time. So if I skip over something, please ask me, and I'm very happy to delve into it a bit more. So I'm going to share my screen, and here we go. Let me know if everybody can see. There's a slide here that's a picture of me. Got a thumbs up? Fabulous. I'm going to go into present full screen. There we go. All right, there we are. And I'm just going to move people here. All right, so thank you and welcome. I'm not sure how much of an introduction was sent out about me, so I thought I'd start from scratch, so bear with me if you're familiar with some of this information. I'm an Australian artist, so I was born in Australia, and like a lot of Australians, I think we're born with itchy feet. So we grow up and the first thing we want to do is go and travel the world. So has kind of been one of the kind of through lines of my life experience. But I was born in Canberra, Australia, and that's on the east coast of Australia. And like many of us, I was very fortunate to grow up in a creative family. And it was quite fortunate that both my parents were very supportive of me going to art school. So it was kind of one of those experiences where I was doing a lot of textiles as I was growing up, you know, things like cross-stitching, sewing my own clothes, you know, doing all those kind of teenage things that you do. And I kind of just fell into going to art school. My boyfriend at the time, his mother was studying textiles at the art school, and she said, "Kate, I really think you should go to art school." And I went, "Oh, that sounds very scary." But anyway, I put together my portfolio and was accepted, and that's kind of like been the series of lifelong events that's kind of gotten me to this point in time. as you probably know, going to and being exposed to an education environment where there's so much going on, it can't help but whet the appetite on all the different possibilities and experiences out there. And I have been very fortunate to study in different parts of the world because I do like to travel so much. So one of my underlying philosophies through life, I think, is I really enjoy traveling. I really enjoy absorbing and learning more about different cultures. And I really enjoy making art. So if I can, I try and combine all three in one point in time, which is now why I'm living in Truro, Nova Scotia. As we go through this series of slides, you'll kind of understand how I got to this point here. But I really do like to combine all of those three to, I find, enrich my lifestyle and inform my art as well. So we're going to start, and apologies for the slides. This is going back to 1999, 2000. So this is back in the day when most of the images that we took were on slide, which were then scanned onto digital to be reproduced. So we're going back to ancient technology here. And one of the things that I was really interested in when I first graduated from the textile workshop was doing fabric manipulation. So we were incredibly lucky to have a fabulous Japanese artist come and share his techniques with us whilst I was studying. His name was Junichi Arai. I'm not sure if you're familiar with his work, but he's just the most amazing artist. And what I really liked about his method of working was he was combining traditional Japanese fabric techniques like shibori and combining them with very contemporary textiles like lame, which is a metallic fabric with a metal coating and a nylon substructure. And through different heat and chemical processes, you could remove some of the metal so that you had some parts of the fabric that were transparent, the nylon understructure, and then some parts that had kept or retained the metallic coating. And through using different shibori techniques, this was how these techniques were developed. So I was living in Canberra. I grew up in Bateman's Bay, which was a small coastal town, and that has really, that's intrinsic to me and my personality. We spend a lot of time at the beach, swimming, walking, collecting things that had been washed up. And I was really fascinated by sea urchins. So the fabric that you can see here is inspired by the sea and sea urchins in particular. They started off as about 2-meter long pieces of fabric. This is before they were manipulated. And then by the time they were all wrapped and bound and ready for the processes, they probably would have been maybe about 50 centimeters. So it's amazing just how much fabric can go into making some of these sculptural pieces. They went on to become, so using this process, I entered a garment in the New Zealand Wearable Arts Awards. And so I got to see it walk down the runway, which was super amazing. And that was also my first dip of my toe in the water for traveling. I thought, well, it's in New Zealand, I might as well go over and check it out. So I went over to New Zealand, explored some of the area, and also got to see my art walking down the runway. I also won the inaugural Emerging Artist Award from Fibre Arts International in, I think it was 2001. And so that was kind of like my first foray into being an artist outside of art school, which took in an incredible amount of courage. Looking back at it, it's hard to believe that it took so much courage, but I guess you think, this isn't very exciting. But my teacher was very supportive, and she said, no, you should apply for all these things. So I've learnt that you've got to be in it to win it. So, and sometimes you won't always get accepted, but you've just got to give it your best shot, and you just never know where it will take you. So moving on from that, shortly after, I had the opportunity to do an exchange with the Kyoto Seika University, and that was just amazing. So because of Australia's geographical location, we've got quite a close connection with Asia. There's a lot of Asian influence that comes to Australia, both in the textiles and also the food and the cuisine. So I was already very interested in Japanese techniques and aesthetics, and being there and being immersed in the culture just really blew my mind. I think I took pictures and drew all of the food that I ate because it was just so different and so beautiful. And I was just so impressed with the Japanese aesthetics whilst I was there as well. So I took a lot of images and did a lot of sketching. And when I came back, I had the opportunity to this was my first solo show. And I created a whole lot of textiles inspired by my experiences there. And it was called Fish Bells and Teapots, because they were kind of like the three things that I kept seeing over and over again. And so I created kimonos that were dyed using origami techniques. So I was quite fascinated in what happened when folding your fabrics in different ways. Doing some partial dyeing so that I could then come back in and do screen printing on top. So going back a step, when I was studying at art school, my major focus was in textiles, but we had the opportunity to do sub-majors so we could expand our horizons. And so I was very interested in printmaking. We also had a printmaking on fabric module, which was really interesting. And I also did paper making. So these kind of like sculptural and printmaking elements also continue through my work. So again, these slides I've had to dig out of the depths. I probably should rescan them off the slides that I took, the transparencies. So you can see here, I've got the teapots. This is the back of it, so they're upside down, exploring the different patterns that the dye creates. And then this is the front of them as well. So they're life-size, fully wearable, made out of silk, and just really enjoyable to create. I had never sewn a kimono before, so it was very interesting and challenging. I kind of just looked at a kimono and put it together. I think these days you could probably do a Google search and it's all there for you. So it was a big learning curve. And then on from that, I had in 2003, I had the ability to have another solo show. And this was a really big deal because this was the Goulburn Regional Art Gallery. And so they have quite an application process to exhibit as part of, and you have to demonstrate a certain level of professionality, I guess, and experience to be able to participate in this gallery. So this is my first solo show there. And it, again, was inspired by my experience in Japan. And it's called The Emperor's New Clothes. So one of the things I'm totally fascinated by, and this is another thread that continues through my work, is transparency, light, and how light creates shadows and the illusions that are created. So The Emperor's New Clothes is based upon the children's story of an emperor who very proudly walks around wearing no clothes. So I wanted to represent that in using monofilament, so fishing lines. So if you were to wear these, you'd very clearly be able to see the body underneath. I wasn't brave enough to photograph myself in them, but I should, because I think that'd be really fascinating to see. And I wove 3 different cloths for this show. So the weaving technique has a pocket pattern, pocket weave in it, and that's how I slotted each of these little bits of paper. This one is called Wishes, and it's based upon, I've got some pictures here. Here we go. So when you're in Japan, there's a lot of Shinto shrines, and Shinto is an old religion that refers back to nature a lot of the time. That's very, very close to Buddhism. And when you go and visit temples, you have the opportunity to purchase a wish, which is what all of these bits of paper are, read it, fold it up, and then tie it either onto, these are ropes, but you can see some people have also tied it into trees, and you can see other variations of it here. And I was just fascinated by this. This was something so new, and I thought so aesthetically beautiful. It almost looks like butterflies, or the idea of the blossoms, that I wanted to recreate it. Plus, I just love the idea of these wishes on paper. So I also created one with folded paper cranes, referring back to the story of 1,000 paper cranes. And unfortunately, the image of the third one, which includes a whole lot of Japanese 10 yen coins, which is, they're like a bronze color with the hole in the middle of them. And I selected those because not only are they currency, but they're used as a token of friendship. So the Japanese would very carefully wrap these 10 yen coins in a piece of paper and give them to one another as a token of friendship. So I just loved that idea behind it. So that was, this was kind of where I'm like, yes, traveling, being immersed in culture, learning about different things. That was, I just realized that was the best way for me to learn and get inspiration. So we jump forward about 7 years. Now we're in London, UK. So this is going back to where I was saying most Australians get the travel bug and start traveling overseas. So I had the good fortune to live and work in London for 7 years, it was. And whilst I was there, I did a lot of traveling. One of the things that really I connected with was the beautiful plastic bags and the colors that you can get. I'm not sure if they exist so much now, but you know, like the pink of the Superdrug store and the orange of Sainsbury's and the green of Marks and Spencer. I just loved them. And so that started a whole new project for me. I was breaking them down or cutting them into strips, re-knitting them, and creating a whole lot of different bags out of the plastic bags. So this is a picture of my friend holding one of them. And I was very fortunate to be part of an exhibition called Art on the Underground, where they took posters of artworks and they put them in the tube stations of the subway, the tube. You'll have to excuse me, my terminology is beginning to leave me. But I was living on Edgware Road at the time, so I was very fortunate to be able to have my my bags displayed there. Or was it Marble Arch? Anyway, on the underground somewhere. So that was pretty cool because all these people were walking past my art on a regular basis. So that was pretty exciting. Moving forward again, so now we're back in Australia. And when I returned home, I moved to Goulburn, which is about an hour out of Canberra, and it's a little bit more rural. And what appealed to me was the historic buildings. Now, I know Australia doesn't have the same history as you do. So this is a little cottage that was built probably in the 1780s, I think it was, something like that. And I just fell in love with it. And the reason why I'm showing you a picture of this is because I went from living in this little cottage, and every time Mum would come and visit, she'd get excited by what she could see, because there's a little bit of art here and a little bit of art there. I would say a bit of mess here and a bit of mess there, but if you looked through the mess, you could see all these interesting things. The bathroom had the old claw feet baths, and the kitchen used to once upon a time have the old wood stove in it. And so it was just, I love history. So I had a lot of fun drawing all of my surroundings. And whilst I was in Goulburn, I was very fortunate to be taught ceramics by an artist who had lived and worked in Japan for a number of years. And so he was the first person to introduce me to the concept of wabi-sabi, because I went in thinking, I'm just going to throw these pots and they're going to be amazing. And little did I realize that there's quite a lot of work involved and a lot of practice involved to get these beautifully thrown pots. So, and I got very discouraged, and he said, embrace the imperfection, because once you get good at it, you'll find putting those little wobbles in is really, really difficult. So I appreciated him saying that. And so I did. As you can see, I embraced the imperfection, and there's lots of little wobbles everywhere. And I think I probably created some challenges for myself as well, because I was working with porcelain, and that's a very delicate clay to work with. It can be like almost like working with butter. It's a lot softer than some of the heavier bodied clays. But I really liked the translucency of it and the ability to do these beautiful drawings. So this method of working takes me back to when I was learning how to do printmaking, where you're doing etchings and you're drawing into a copper plate and then eating away the etched lines. And it's the same kind of process with creating the images on here. So all those fine little lines are actually inscribed with a tool that's probably, say, the thickness of a pin. And then you come back in and you paint the cobalt blue on top of it. And then once that's dried, you scrape off the excess cobalt blue with like a razor blade, and it just leaves these very fine lines where you've engraved or etched into the surface. So I really enjoyed this as a different method of working. I was doing a lot of screen printing on textiles at the time, and I wanted the ability to take the imagery that I was putting on textiles onto ceramics. And I know that you can get decals and you can very easily translate it, but I wanted to learn from scratch all of the process. So of course, it's a bit like going down a rabbit hole, and I fell totally in love with the experience. So this is a vignette scene of my bathroom. We also have a scene of my kitchen. And we've got like the little tea trolley with things that's underneath a window. Some, Mum calls these the twins, some beautiful old chairs, and the sink with cups and plates above it. And what's really lovely about this, because I no longer live in this house, it's a really lovely moment in time that's being captured in these ceramics. And then we've got my lounge room. You got a spinning wheel here that's featured on one of the cups, a TV on top of a cabinet, and this beautiful old fireplace here that had like a gas stove in front of it. So just a fun way of capturing images. And then this is in the bedroom, little cat on the bed, and the scene looking out the window. So it was a fun way of working. Moving on, but taking these same ideas but back into textiles again, I took the drawings of the vignettes that I was working within textiles and transcribed those ideas into machine embroidery. So this is going back to my interests in the delicate sheer nature, shadows that are created, and just taking something that something that we do on a daily basis, like a cup of tea, and kind of capturing that as a treasured moment. So again, this is the lounge room actually, and this, what you can see on here was on the mantelpiece. So there's an alarm clock and 3 Russian dolls, and I think these might have been containers full of precious things, and then there's a candle over here and a plant on a chair, that kind of thing. So I really enjoyed working this way. It was a new method for me working at the time, and a great way of being able to translate imagery. Not to mention, I do enjoy how when you're working with the same subject matter, but you're using different techniques to portray it, how it changes. So, you know, looking at the bathroom scene on the ceramics is very different to this bathroom scene here. I think looking at this one probably takes a little bit of imagination. We've got the bath here with the claw feet. There was the shower head here and the shower rail there. And then we've got shampoo and conditioner on the side there. This was a little sugar bowl. And so this is going back into the kitchen with those twin chairs that I pointed out previously. And this, I think, is in the hallway. So that was where all the plants were, and that was a cup of tea. So in that same era of time, I was part of another exhibition, and taking my interests of old historic homes, I did a lot of research into the old homesteads of Canberra. So Canberra is a designed city, and it was built, gosh, I think it was in the 1800s. And it was chosen as a site because it was kind of halfway between Sydney and Melbourne, which were the 2 other main centres at the time. And so before Canberra was turned into the capital city that it is today, there are a number of homesteads in the area. And what you see on these pots are images from that period of time, from those homesteads. They're based on the idea of a billy can. And I'm not sure if that resonates with you, but kind of like the old pot or old pan that you'd put on top of the fire, and you'd either be able to brew a cup of tea or some soup or whatever you had. So it was very much pioneering Australian kind of utensil that everybody would have. So these in scale, you're looking at, they're probably about 30 centimeters in diameter. So they're quite large. And this is where I began my foray into working with found objects. So each of the bits of handle or the wire that you can see was from an old fence in a paddock. So I enjoyed the contrast between the beautiful translucent of the glaze on the inside of the pots with these very rustic handles on the outside. And in that same period of time, this is when I went and did my first artist in residence program. And like travel, these experiences stay with you. So Hill End is based in a remote part of New South Wales, kind of, if you think of where Sydney is and go inland a bit, that's where it is. And what makes Hill End so fascinating is in the 1800s, there was a massive gold rush. A fellow found a gold nugget that, no joke, was about 150 centimeters tall. So it was almost the size of a person. And this gold nugget just drove this big gold rush into the center of nowhere, pretty much. So it was this bustling town for a number of years. And then the gold rush ended and everyone just left the town behind. So it turned into a ghost town with all these beautiful old historic buildings. Thankfully, some Australian artists discovered this little treasure trove and they went and lived there. And as a legacy of one of the artists, there's now this ongoing artist in residence program. And I was incredibly fortunate to be part of it. It's one of the best artist in residence programs in Australia. And I was there for a month and it was just amazing. So whilst I was there, I took lots of photos, I did lots of sketching, and I made lots of artwork. And some of my experiences I'm still kind of recreating. And shortly thereafter, I was also learning jewelry because I wanted to go into other forms of three-dimensional objects. And so I was very fortunate that I could go back to my printmaking exploration of all the fences in Hills End, and then translate that into a metal object. So the brooch we're looking at is 6 by 6 centimeters, and was inspired by just the different gates and fences that were around. It was so fascinating. And not too long after that, so this is a bit of a typo, it should be 2014. So pretty much what happened was I did an artist in residence program at Hill End, and then I was very fortunate to do another artist in residence program in Nova Scotia, Canada, which is why I'm here today. So I came over and again, did lots of drawings, did lots of explorations, had an exhibition, and I just loved this place so much because everybody that I met was they're either an artist or a musician or involved in the creative industries in some way. And I think that again goes back to the close connection of East Coast Canada and say Ireland, because of the music and the kitchen parties, and everybody just gets together, and music is a way of people connecting. So I came back and I did my Master in Fine Arts at NASCAD, and I was doing ceramics, I was doing textiles, and one of my fascinations at that point in time was the found object. So what began as a collection of fence pit bits for my artwork turned into found objects. And I guess it was that point in time where I realized that quite often objects are going to outlive us. So until that point in time, I'd never really given it too much thought what happened to an object once I'd either discarded it or given it away or something like that. And so I really loved the idea of personifying objects and their history and what would happen if they could connect and talk to us and tell us what their life stories were. So what you're seeing here is the culmination of my study at NASCAD, and it's a lot of clay, a lot of hand marks. So I loved the gesture and the idea of leaving a trace, combined with found objects. So many of the objects were either found on the beach or collected from as I was going about my daily walks. And it was a fascinating exploration. Also, what fed into this experience was during the summer of 2015, I'd won a scholarship to travel and learn how to make jewelry in Florence. So I was there for a month and I was learning all these great techniques. And then after that, I did a week artist program with a jewelry designer, excuse me, called Root Peters. And he really encouraged and pushed us to the limits of our comfort zones, I guess. And quite often that's where the interesting things start to happen. And he said each of the artists who participated, we each had homework if we wanted to continue our exploration after being with him for a week. And his assignment for me was to come up with 222 grips for a stone. Because how that had come about was because I'd taken a very precious ring with me, and each of the artists were asked to do that and to kind of say why it was important. So he looked at this ring that was important to me and he's like, grips of stones, I'd like you to see your exploration and how you see if you can come up with 222 different ways of portraying that. And I just love that idea of gripping stone, but then I also really like the idea of what happens if the stone grips something else. So this is what you're seeing here. And these are some close-ups of stones gripping things and things gripping stones. I also was really enjoying the tension of, say, one of these big pieces of clay, which you're looking at is probably the size of a kilo of flour, to give you an idea, and weight. It's kind of like, what would you say, about 20 centimeters by 30 or 40 centimeters, quite heavy, couple of pounds, couple of kilos. And so this particular one here had a whole lot of nails embedded in it, and each nail had a string attached to it. And I loved how, as an individual string, you would not be able to support that heavy object. But when you have lots of contributing bits of strings, it could then be suspended in space. And I found that really fascinating. In fact, I'd like to explore that some more. And so here are some other of my explorations of grips of stones using different twigs, leather, and found objects. I was then very fortunate to be accepted into a artist in residence program in Iceland, and I was there for 2017 and I went back in 2018. And what was fabulous was in 2017 I was there for winter, so I had the experience of the really short winter days and the really long winter nights, and being there to see the aurora borealis and just experiencing the vastness of the landscape under snow. So again, I was sketching my experiences. I was doing a lot of watercolors of my experiences as well, and just kind of collecting so that I could create something at the end of it. And the 3 textile art pieces that came from that, this is one of them here. Excuse me. And this has kind of informed my current way of working, where I like to start with a fabric that's already got some marks made on it. So in this particular one, it's indigo dyed fabric that's a different shibori technique. So that was dyed first in the indigo. And what I do is I'll leave my fabrics lying about the studio, and I ask the fabrics what they want to be, what kind of image are they going to become. So sometimes it's really easy and I'll see it like that, and other times it takes a little bit of walking past and looking at it and then letting it sit for a bit and coming back. This particular one turned into an art piece called Chasing Aurora, and it was one of the experiences of whilst I was there. I was very lucky to be paired up with another textile artist, and together we would go out and we'd try and see the aurora borealis. And Iceland's got these great big mountains and super clear skies. And one night we were trying to drive out of away from the city lights of Reykjavik, so that we could see the aurora borealis. We didn't see it that night, but the experience left such an imprint on me that I wanted to share that on the fabric. So we've got down below, using the straight or the running stitch, we've got the replication of the mountains there, and then using sashiko stitching at the top and replicating the stars at the top there. This one's called The Sensitive Nature of Moss. And again, it's starting by creating fabric with mark making techniques. So this one's a lot of fun, and it's a crackle technique where you apply a paste, let it dry, and then you paint the fabric on, and then part of the paint leads through the crackles underneath. And one of the experiences of being in Iceland was, because it's so new in a lot of ways. Like there's lots of volcanoes and not much lands, not much growth. So there's lots of mosses that are hundreds of years old, and they're just sublime. But they're also very sensitive. And with the growing tourism in Iceland, there were lots of signs everywhere saying, keep off the moss. So I really loved this idea of, keep off the moss. And I then took that concept and created an image, and you've got the mountains in the background, and then the moss fields close up, and then some of the lava stones that you would see sitting around everywhere. And then this is a third piece created from that same experience. And again, it's an indigo dyed fabric. And one of the other amazing experiences that I had whilst I was there was experiencing the secret iceberg lagoon. And it's amazing because you see these icebergs that are big chunks of ice that have broken off the glacier, and they're floating down majestically through black sands, and they finally make their way to the ocean. And quite often they get washed up onto the beach, and the beach is known as Diamond Beach because you've got all these various size bits of ice on the beach. And I just happened to be there on daybreak. Thankfully, sunrise during winter is about 10:30. So I got to be there 10:30 in the morning and watching these most amazing, majestic icebergs float past me, and then the sun coming through and shining through the ice. So again, that experience I recreated from using just a plain old running stitch and one of the different Japanese sashiko stitches down here. We are now in about 2018, 2019, I think it is. And this was an artist in residence program that I did in Cape Breton. Excuse me, I'm just going to have a quick sip of water. So for those of you who are familiar with the east coast of Canada, what we're looking at here this is Nova Scotia. Up the top here, this here is Cape Breton, and then this is Newfoundland. So we've got the east coast of Canada, Nova Scotia, and Newfoundland. And so this artist in residence program was a lot of fun. We spent a week camping and hiking in the Cape Breton Highlands National Park. And each day we'd meet up with the rangers, and they'd take us to different parts of the park and talk about the history and their program and what they're planning to do. One of the things that really took my fancy was we were being told about how they're looking to reintroduce wild salmon back into the parks. And I was just fascinated that these wild salmon, they swim thousands of miles each year from all these parts of the world up through the Straits of Greenland, and they'll return to the same river that they were born in. And I was just totally fascinated by that. I was also really fascinated that you can tell the age of a salmon by counting the rings in its scales, a bit like counting the rings in tree trunks. And so anyway, I was doing all this research about wild salmon, and one of the articles I read was how farmed salmon suffer from depression. And one of the reasons is because they're kept in these very small pens. They don't have a lot of freedom, and they can't swim very far. And so I was really taken by these ideas. And so I wanted to portray what I discovered. So these are antique linen tea towels that I've then stitched the map on one side, and then I've looked to replicate the pattern or the migration path of the salmon. So you can see here we've got healthy salmon swimming along, and then on the right the not so healthy salmon, because they also quite often will dye salmon to make them healthy and pink. the farm salmon. So these are kind of generally the colors of their flesh, and I've replicated or stitched the main roads that these salmon would travel if they were farmed fish. So I thought that was really poignant for me, and I wanted to share that as a textile work. This is something that you might be familiar with as well if you're familiar with me and my work. I have a pair of studio jeans, and they're called studio jeans because I was wearing them whilst I was at NASCAD studying in the ceramic department, and the jeans started to wear holes in the knees, and I didn't want to go out and buy a new pair of jeans. So I thought, well, I'm going to start mending them, and I'm going to see what happens when I mend. Every time they get a hole, I'm just going to mend them, and I'm just going to keep wearing them. So you're seeing them after many years and many mends. Each mend has been put on because there is a hole underneath. They're not just added because they're there because they're functional. And I found it really fascinating because I could see through wearing this one pair of jeans over and over again how they took on the characteristics of me and my wearing patterns. So for example, because they were my studio jeans, I'd quite often rub my hands, clean my hands on my thighs. So that's where a lot of the wear and tear first started. Then lots of holes started over around here on the back side. And I also found it really fascinating. I'd always put my mobile phone in my right hand back pocket. So this started to deteriorate quite a lot as well, compared with the left hand side, which is not too bad. So I just really love how, again, going back to objects having lives, how textiles can really show the characteristics and the habits of the wearers. So this is an ongoing project. I'm also very interested in sashiko and the different designs and the different patterns. So that's what I do these days. But I know we want to make time for some questions as well. So I'm going to wrap it up there. If you would like to learn more about me, I have a couple of different websites. There's my kateward.com.au website, and that's my artist website. If you're interested to learn more about my sashiko stitching, then Zen Stitching is where all of that information happens. And I also have a fun event that comes up twice yearly, and it's called Making Zen. And it's actually coming up in a couple of weeks from now, so I'm delighted to share it with you. I've invited different artists from around the world, and every day for a week, starting the 15th of May, 4 artists will get online and they'll share a project and their techniques with you. And it's free for the first 24 hours. And if you want to have lifetime access to all of these wonderful presentations, plus a whole lot of other bonuses that the artists are providing, then you have the option to purchase the lifetime access for $59. So I'm going to wrap it up there and stop my screen share so that we can open it up to everybody who would like to ask any questions.
Hi, Kate. Thank you. Thank you so much for that lovely talk. Lovely whirlwind world tour, actually.
It really was.
Yeah. Can I just ask you about your Making Zen project there? You said every day for 1 week from the 15th of May, you're going to have 4 artists doing a talk. Is that advertised on your Zen Stitching page? How do you
It will be, yes. So it's going to be officially announced and tickets are available as of Monday. But you can go to makingzen.com and sign up so that you'll be the first to know about it when information is released.
Okay, and you get that information through a newsletter or something, is it?
Yeah, just through email. But to give you an idea, we've got artists who will be sharing quilting techniques. We've got different embroidery styles. We have some eco dyeing. There's bookmaking, combining books with textiles. It really is a plethora of goodness. And it's the kind of thing, if you're really interested in making and learning new techniques, then it's kind of like being a bit like a kid in a lolly shop. There's so much you could do. It could literally take you 6 months to work your way through all of the programs and to apply all of the techniques. And what makes it so fun is because there's so much happening all at once, you quite often start putting ideas together from the different artists. So it's quite an inspirational journey as well.
Well done in organising that. It sounds fabulous, really.
Keeps me busy.
Yeah, I bet you are. Lovely comment here from Dee, who says, beautiful work, love the blue and white pots. Thank you for sharing. So does that mean now at this point, Kate, that you've settled on textiles, or would you continue to dabble in a bit of ceramics and jewellery as well?
That's such a good question, because one of the streams of my creativity that I didn't even touch upon in the presentation is I'm also very interested in film, working with analog film, particularly Super 8. And I like the tactility of it, and I like the graininess of it and the experiences that you get with the projection. And, you know, it's a different style of working with digital that we have the option to work with these days. So yes, I am continuing to work with not so much the jewellery and the ceramics, simply because I don't have a studio that allows me to get messy like that. I have a studio in my house. So textiles is fabulous because I can it doesn't get too crazy in here. And if I want to get a little bit messy, I can go down to the kitchen. But the film is a wonderful way of working because I can take the camera out with me and I can be recording areas of interest, and then bring that back to the studio and work with that with editing tools and stuff like that. So we've actually got, we're going to France in August, and we'll be doing a little bit of textiles and a little bit of filming. And my partner is a musician, so he'll be recording the audio around us as well.
Lovely. And do you develop the Super 8 yourself?
I can, yes. So some of it I will, and some of it I'll get sent away. And so that you get two different effects. So, and this is why I like the hands-on experience. You can create a developer made with dandelions, coffee, and vitamin C. So I love the ability of being able to do it at home. There's just something, I guess I'm such a do-it-yourselfer. I love being able to be part of every step of the process. When you do it though, because you're not working with the same precision as it would be processed in a lab, there are going to get scratches and there might be little light fades and all that kind of stuff. But that to me is part of the beauty of working. I guess I really like to let the materials speak and tell me what they want to be rather than me telling them what I want them to be. So there's a nice interchange between the outcome and the concept, I guess. There's that little spark of mystery that you never quite know what you're going to come up with. And that's the magic for me. That's how I like to work.
And are any of your films on the website?
They are. So if you go to kateward.com.au, they are all there and you can watch them all.
Lovely, fantastic. Sorry, in case, does anyone else would anyone else like to ask some questions? Just unmute yourselves, please, and ask away. There's a lovely note there from Imelda, who's saying, "Hi, Kate. I'm amazed at the range of techniques and skills you have become involved with. You seem to have had the opportunity to experience a range of interesting artist retreats, which I'm sure were very special." So, yeah, absolutely. I'd agree with that.
And I think that's where artist retreats are really helpful. And because we were talking about it, just how life gets, kind of, you're busy with life all the time. And so sometimes the things that are important for you, like the creating, get overrun by going to the grocery store or kind of, making sure the cat's fed, all those kind of things. So when you go on an artist retreat, it's a wonderful opportunity to just focus on creating art and those amazing experiences. So it's pretty special. It's a wonderful way of collating a whole lot of information all at once.
Fantastic. Focusing. Some lovely artist retreats in Ireland, actually, if you ever wanted to come over.
Oh, you'll have to tell me. I'd love to.
Look at the Sirius Art Centre in Cove. It's beautiful. It's really, it's very good. You'd have to apply maybe 2 years in advance. But like if you looked at that now, it's very beautiful, beautiful building. Fabulous experience there.
Oh, thank you. I will. I'll have to get you to send me the details, and I'll look into that.
Yeah, I'll share you the link on Instagram. Yeah.
Yeah, that'd be wonderful. Thank you.
No problem. Would anybody like to, I feel I'm hogging the microphone here. If anybody wants to say hi. Go away. Oh, go ahead, Fiona.
Sorry, am I butting in on someone?
You're perfect, Imelda. Work away.
I just really wanted to ask again, because maybe I was sending the message to you and I wasn't too sure exactly how do you define Zen stitching? Is it any particular stitching, or is it just a range of stitches that you describe?
So it's a really good question. So Zen stitching came about because of the feelings of calmness that stitching can bring. And as textile artists, I think we're all familiar with those feelings that you get when you sit down, and it doesn't need to be a needle and thread. It can also be knitting. It can be a number of different things, but just that feeling of sitting down and becoming absorbed in a process. And so that's where Zen stitching came about, because I was doing a lot of teaching of the sashiko, and I was asked to provide some samples of work ahead of a class, because generally I would just demonstrate in the class. And I think I had about 3 different part-time jobs at the time, and I was trying to figure out how I would squeeze in stitching this sampler. And I just really started to, rather than resent having to create this sample, I really enjoyed the process, because it allowed me, because when you stitch, you sit down in your favorite chair, you generally make yourself a nice cup of tea, and you really enjoy the process. It gives you a moment to slow down. And because you're so focused on what you're working on and the tactile sensation, you kind of forget the world around you, and you become absorbed in what you're working on. And it's almost like a form of active meditation. So you really are, because you're focused on what you're working on and being in the now. That's where the Zen stitching comes from. So
is it very, like, I was looking tonight on a Japanese program about borrowed stitching. A lot what you were doing on the trousers, on your jeans, and that kind of just in out, not a specific stitch really, just a pattern. Is that really what you're talking about?
Yes, it is. So the wonderful thing about sashiko is it's all a running stitch, which is wonderful. So it means that it's open to people of every ability. Like Western style embroidery, there's so many different tricks for like doing French knots and grub stitch and all those things. Whereas with the sashiko stitch and the borrow stitch, it is just a running stitch, and it came about from a necessity. The fabric was scarce. A lot of people couldn't afford cotton, so they had to create fabrics with what they had around them. Growing seasons were really short. So the idea of mending was really, really intrinsic in their culture. And it was also relating back to the Shinto religion, where you respect nature, and you didn't throw anything out. You would always find a use for things. So some of the beautiful old traditional sashiko and boro cloths, they're patched with tiny little bits of fabric, because every bit of fabric was precious. You know, I'm reading a book at the moment, and to spin enough thread to make ourselves a pair of jeans, we'd have to spin, I think it's 10 kilometers worth of thread. That's not even like thinking about processing it, growing it, cleaning it, any of that. And if you were to translate that into an 8-hour workday of spinning, it would be, I think it's 13 days, something like that.
Wow.
So when you think of the labor involved in creating these fabrics, they are really special, because people didn't have the luxury to just sit and spin. Like, you had to go and work in the fields, you had a family to look after, you had to cook food, all those other things. So the concept and the value around things, I think, was quite different back then. And because of it, though, and I think that's one of the reasons why I admire the Japanese aesthetic so much, they've taken something so utilitarian as a running stitch, and they've created beautiful patterns out of it. So it's aesthetically beautiful, but also very functional as well.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Mute again.
I noticed, is it Fiodna?
Yes.
I noticed you had a question.
No, it was two things. The Zen. I'm a retired primary school teacher, but for a lot of children who often find that it's difficult to be creative and get going with the teacher starts an art class. Zentangle. People might be aware of this word. So Zentangle is used a lot with children. They have a very specific size. It's an 8.9 cm square, and then they're free to move in any which way in the time. So it's a fabulous way of opening the mind. But I can now see the value of using Zentangle with something like the Sashiko, which is fabulous. No, my original, what really awoke for me when you mentioned about the Shinto shrines and the little wishes in Ireland. The hawthorn tree is the tree that the fairy folk would have owned in the past times, in Celtic times. And in the month of May, which is just starting, in many parts of rural Ireland, people tie tiny pieces of cloth to the trees, and then and then it's for good luck or protection or a wish you want to make to come true. And then you wait for, over time, the fabric decomposes, and as does the problem, so that life goes on, and so on and so forth. So it was so funny that the Japanese is somewhat maybe similar to the Japanese idea of making a wish and wishing something good to come. So it brought back a lot of, as a child, my grandparents and little pieces of cloth, how they were kept. And in the old days, it was the pre-Celt, before Christianity. It was more of a pagan system. But when Christianity came along, then of course they invented holy wells, and the nearest tree to the holy well ended up getting the tree. So that's why, thank you, Kate, you brought that memory back.
Oh, that's beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing. I love that there's this kind of like connection of between the cultures of using these ideas. And I just love that idea. What was it called again? What is the name of?
Well, the hawthorn tree, which is common also in Canada, but in Ireland it's often just called the rag tree. But during the month of May, if you Google it, during the month of May, often there's a lot of celebrations, Christian celebrations, but it goes back way thousands of years before Christianity, when it was used just to look for protection, for healing, anything towards maybe trying to connect the spirit world with the physical world, that sort of thing. Anyway,
I can't wait to find out more about that. Thank you so much for sharing that with me. And it is quite interesting. I think the more I start to read and understand about just our connections with cloth and the associations that we have. I mean, textiles is intrinsic in our lives and has been for many, 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 many years. I'm reading a wonderful book at the moment. It's kind of World History of Textiles, or I don't know. I'll share the link with you. But it's talking about how you could pretty much call, instead of calling the Stone Age, it could be called the String Age, because making string or making twine was just as revolutionary, if not more, because you needed the string to hold the stone onto the handle. And nowadays, because of our technology and our ability to see smaller and smaller things, they've actually found little bits of rope twined together that date back to that time to show that, yes, we were creating ropes to be able to help us with what we were doing. So it's really fascinating how much textiles is involved in our lives, and how we don't really think about it too much. You know, it's something we take for granted. But going back to what you were saying with the fabric and the spirituality within it, and the idea of protection and making wishes, that's also comes through quite strong in the Japanese sashiko as well. So a lot of the different patterns that you stitch have got different meanings. One of the beautiful patterns that we might be familiar with, it almost looks like a star, and it's called a sanaha, which is hemp leaf. And that's particularly stitched on children's clothing because the hemp plant is strong and robust and healthy. And so people stitch that pattern onto children's clothing with the hope and wishes that that is then carried through the fabric, protects the child, and they grow up strong and healthy as well.
It's a fabulous idea, actually, to know that. Thank you very much for sharing that, Kate. Yeah, I wonder, does anyone else want to ask any more questions before we leave? Or
even share knowledge. I love hearing the traditions. That's so wonderful.
Absolutely. Thank you very much for that, Fina. I'm going to be asking you about the Zen tangle, by the way.
Love it.
Thank you.